Welcome to Set the Captives Free Ministries, with evangelist Willie Needham, providing Christ-centered solutions for the bewildered believer. So whether you're a battle-hardened street preacher in need of some advice, or a timid spirit with a heart for the lost who doesn't know where to start, this podcast is for you. So stay tuned and find out what we can do for you. God bless. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to this week's edition of the Set the Captives Free Ministries podcast. So today I'm going to talk about what is quite possibly the most frustrating aspect of any evangelistic endeavor, and that is grabbing the attention of a group of people and holding them. You see, if you're an evangelist like me, you've probably run into this challenge at some point in time, and to overcome it, you've more than likely come up with some sort of gimmick whenever you're street preaching. For instance, you might be handing out bottles of water or candy bars, you might play music, perform sleight of hand tricks, because we all know it's not actually magic, or telling jokes, or putting on some sort of theatrical performance. The list goes on. You see, we're in a society these days where people they don't just want a product or a service. They really want to be sold on it. And that makes things very challenging, because you have a message. You have the gospel. And you want people to hear it, right? Because the gospel is what saves people, right? You want people to be saved, right? But if they don't hear the gospel, how can they be saved? Because as it is written, faith comes by hearing. And how will they hear if it is not preached to them? And how can anyone preach if no one is sent? So it becomes very frustrating when you just want to get the gospel message out there and people don't want to hear it because you're not selling it to them. And that can be quite the dilemma for any messenger of the gospel. Because if you feel like you don't get a crowd, that you might have failed. And fear of failure has a tendency to drive people to other methods. Methods such as hurling insults at people as they walk by, or graphic signage. You know the signs I'm talking about. Big, bold letters, God hates you. Things like that. Or a giant banner with an aborted child on it, saying, if you do this, you're going to burn in hell. Very graphic, very, very shocking approaches. And I've seen and I've heard of street preachers even trying to start fights. And it's I don't really like it. I'm not a fan. You won't see me doing any of that stuff. I just can't do it. It's a matter of preference. But I'm not going to condemn those who do that, as long as they are preaching the gospel. But that's the problem. People who get into that level, they get into that mindset of wanting to start a fight with somebody, it usually means that they are doing it out of frustration. Their intention is just to get attention. But what tends to happen is once they get attention, they just keep going with it. And the same can even be said on the more gentle approach, such as playing music and handing out bottles of water. I've done that before, playing music. I was in a very tough area. Not tough as in dangerous, but just tough as in very snobby people, where a buddy of mine, we were on the street corner playing worship music. I was on a little drum box keeping a beat and singing, and then my friend was playing guitar and he was also singing, and we were singing the same song at least, and I thought we sounded pretty good. And you know what? People were handing us $20 bills to keep playing, not to get us to stop. But yet, we start preaching, and the police show up. I would say that's a little bizarre, but that, my friends, is actually the point of this message. You see, it's not your game plan that is going to save people. Because I've done different approaches. I've had different game plans coming into the same area with the same demographic of people. I started out standing on a soapbox and speaking very loudly about very heavy matters of God's justice and judgment and hell and sin. And people ignored it. They kept walking. I mean, they'd cross the street, walk in front of me on the other end of the street, and then come back just so they could stay away from me. And people would make negative comments and keep walking. They'd call the police on me. They'd threaten to sue me. You get the point. And that's when I was trying to be intense and feisty. I took some time away for a season, and I came back, and I had a nice, friendly-looking sign in completely non-threatening letters that simply says, "Are you a good person? Take the test and win a prize." And with the sign, I had a cooler full of ice-cold bottles of water, completely free if you just take the good person test. Now, this is a method that has proven quite effective in many other places to draw in a crowd. And because they're waiting for the water, they're going to pay attention, and they're going to interact. So you can be sure that it is a good method. But in this area, no, people kept on walking. It was a hot day. It was 90 degrees outside. Very humid, very hot. A kind of day where ice cold water for free would have been a wonderful prize. But yet people just kept walking. They would sooner die of dehydration if I was the only source of water that they could possibly get, and that all they had to do was take the good person test. They would rather die of dehydration. I'm telling you. Last year, I had a booth at a car show. I was giving out bottles of water. All you had to do was take the good person test. It was 110 degrees that day, in the shade. And I held up this beautiful, glistening, ice-cold bottle of water. I held it up and said, "You can win this, just a few minutes of your time." They looked at the sign that says, "Are you a good person? Take the test and win a prize." They said, "No, I don't want to." Who in their right mind would turn down a refreshing bottle of water on a day where you could pass out from heat exhaustion and dehydration if you don't drink enough water? You mean you would seriously rather pay $5 for a bottle of water that's probably not even that cold, rather than get a free one and just have to sit through the gospel presentation? Really? Like, you just don't want to hear the gospel that badly, so you'll turn down a really good prize. And believe me, I am not bitter about that. Because it strengthens the point that people are not rejecting you. They are rejecting God. Let me say that once again. They are not rejecting you. They are rejecting God. Plain and simple. Plain and simple, Christians. I mean, let's look at the book of John, chapter 7, verse 7. These are the words of Jesus. You know Jesus, right? The author and perfecter of our salvation. He said, "The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it that its works are evil." Let me say that again. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it that its works are evil. So in transitive logic, Jesus testifies to the world that its works are evil. The point of being a Christian is to be Christ-like to the world. So therefore, by association, you are testifying that the world's works are evil through Christ. You are testifying. So, because you represent Christ, they will treat you the way that they treat Christ. But because Jesus is not physically present at that moment to take the rejection, they take it out on you instead. So, when you go out there, whatever your game plan is, people are going to want to reject you. Not because they think that you're some kind of traveling scam artist. Not because they think you're a psychopath. Not because they think you have some sort of ulterior motive of any sort. But because they are rejecting God. They don't want Jesus in their lives. And so, no matter how kind you are, or no matter how feisty you are, they're going to reject God. But that does not give you license to be a jerk to people. So let me just make this clear. People are rejecting Christ if you are being Christ-like to them, and they reject you. So if they reject you, when you're being Christ-like to them, they are rejecting Christ. If they reject you because you're being a jerk to them, then it's just because you're being a jerk. Now, more importantly, even though they are rejecting God, and they're rejecting Christ, this does not make them unsavable. I don't want you guys to think that, oh, well, they're just going to reject God anyway, so why am I even out there? They're not unsavable. Don't forget where you once were. You were in a point in your life where you were at enmity with God. There was a time in your life when you rejected God. But yet, if you are a Christian, you are saved, which therefore means you are always savable. Don't write anybody off as being unsavable. Well, then what's the purpose of a game plan? What's the purpose of having a gimmick? What's the purpose of having a strategy? What's the purpose of having a consistent style of approach, such as the 4 spiritual laws, or the good person test, or Romans Road? What's the purpose of all that? The purpose is to get you out there. Quite honestly, it doesn't matter what your approach is, as long as your approach is preaching the gospel. So if your approach is not preaching the gospel, then it's not a good one, and you need to find a different one. Be a good steward of the gospel message, and God will do the rest. Remember, Romans 1:16, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to all those who believe." The gospel is the power of God. Your game plan is not going to save people. One final point. Rejection is very difficult to handle. It's going to make you bitter after a while. But before you let the bitterness set in, remember this. You serve God and not man. In serving man, you're going to get let down. You're going to be disappointed. And that's going to make you even more bitter. You're going to get rejected by your own friends because they're going to bail on you. Things like this are going to happen. People are going to stab you in the back. It's really unfortunate. But you are not serving man. If you follow these podcasts and it's motivated you to preach the gospel, don't do this for Willie Needham. Don't do this for Set the Captives Free Ministries. Don't do this for your local church. Do this for God. Because in serving God, you are going to be rewarded. Your reward will be great in heaven. Remember, we're not home yet. So do this for God. Be a good steward of the gospel message, and God will do the rest. Nobody is unsavable. Make a game plan, hone your skills, get out there, share the gospel, and fight until the bell rings. Thank you for listening to the Set the Captives Free Ministries weekly podcast. For more information on the ministry or about Willie Needham, give us a call at 855-507-0379 or saltoftheoats@gmail.com. To write to us or send a donation by mail, our address is P.O. Box 467, Modena, New York 12548. And let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. God bless.